Hi everyone, this is TheHande, and welcome back to the Leaders of Finland series, and today I'm going to be taking a little bit of stock on our current Prime Minister Sanna Marin and her government. So sorry, it's been a while since the previous Leaders of Finland series. I had originally intended to make another one of these not long after the TheHande video, but due to world events, the topic that I had originally chosen for that video seemed a little insensitive, so I kind of put that on the back burner. But since I have been kind of slowly working my way in this series from Finland's past towards the present day, I guess it's finally time that I should talk a little bit about Sanna Marin. When I started this series back in 2020, Sanna Marin had only been Prime Minister for a couple of months, following the very short Antti Rinne government, which lasted roughly 6 months. And at this point, Sanna Marin has put herself in the Finnish history books on 3 fronts altogether. First of all, she's the longest served female prime minister that we've had, which wasn't much of an achievement considering the previous record was literally just 1 year. Her government obviously had to preside over Finland during the COVID pandemic, and she will also be remembered as the prime minister who started the process of Finland joining NATO. Next year, there's going to be another Finnish parliamentary election, and there are a lot of questions up in the air whether Sanna Marin will be able to get a second term as Prime Minister. Remember, she was technically not elected because she was taking over from somebody who was forced out of the position previously. In an earlier version of this video that I planned to do earlier in the summer, I was actually going to make some predictions about those elections, but I think I'm gonna save that until a bit closer to the election because there's a lot of things in motion right now and lots of things that might happen over this following winter. I'll discuss those things in this video as well. But now let's look back at Sanna Marin's accomplishments and also some of the problems that she's faced while Prime Minister. Now, of course, the obvious topic that unfortunately I'm gonna have to talk about is COVID. Now, as you might be aware, Finland wasn't hit by COVID nearly as badly as a lot of other countries, mostly because of Finland's very sparse population. But obviously, as the pandemic amped up, infection and death rates in Finland would obviously spike from time to time. However, Finland only experienced a very brief lockdown period, and it only involved the capital region of Finland. In fact, due to the simple reality that COVID was so new to and nobody really knew how to deal with it, there was actually a lot of hesitancy over things like mask recommendations. Now, Finns obviously had no problems increasing the amount of space you should give to people in order to avoid spreading the virus. In fact, one of the solutions that a lot of grocery stores here wanted to implement was just specific shopping hours for the elderly so that they could avoid getting the virus. But eventually mask usage did become the rule of the day, as well as just putting hand sanitizer everywhere. It wasn't until the summer of 2020 that a lot of questions started to arise that the government's recommendations on these things had maybe not been strictly constitutional. And to their credit, the Sanna Marin government did actually admit that the wording for a lot of these recommendations was a bit vague, and as a result, a lot of people misunderstood them to be the actual legally binding ordinances that would have carried legal consequences. However, any arguments about social distancing and masks, which in Finland wasn't very hot to begin with, was proven pretty moot when later in the year, the Finnish healthcare authority, the THL, basically gave an across-the-board recommendation for masks. The spring of 2020 was also a bit of a dark time for Finnish schools, as students were not allowed to come to school, and most schools tried to at least teach kids from home. This entire process apparently did not work out so well, and we're still kind of paying the price for it. And just like a lot of European countries, when the COVID vaccines were finally available, Finland initially didn't do a very good job of securing a lot of these vaccines, and thus there was a noticeable gap between the amount of vaccines available and people wanting to get them. But eventually the national vaccination program got underway, starting of course with the most elderly and the most sickly individual. And by the summer of 2020, I think most people were starting to get vaccination times in a timely manner. The vast majority of Finns ended up getting the first vaccine, with ever decreasing numbers then getting the second and third vaccine, which is a little discouraging because of course this past summer the amount of COVID cases apparently has gotten disconcertingly high once again. So we'll have to obviously see where things are going to go from here. Now, due to the severity of the COVID crisis, the Finnish opposition wasn't too gung-ho about going after Marin during this time, and therefore the mostly left-leaning government of Marin seemed to be operating in pretty much decent harmony. However, by summer of 2021, when the COVID situation had just kind of turned into the new normal, there did start to be a little bit of strife within Marin's government. And that strife obviously started from the center party, when the party leader Annika Saarikko started to become very vocally critical of the amount of public spending that the Marin government was committing. Marin's government, for instance, hasn't done any huge tax hikes during their time in office. And once the COVID situation started to normalize, the Marin government tried to help those that had been financially the most affected by the COVID crisis, which was small business owners. But unfortunately, once the Marin government started handing out monetary COVID support to small businesses, they were a bit too laissez-faire about the monitoring of this support, and apparently a lot of people ended up abusing it. And while Marin's decision to push forward Finland's NATO membership was broadly supported by pretty much all the parties in the Finnish parliament, the Ukraine crisis, of course, is affecting cost of living in Finland right now. And this is by far the biggest crisis that the Marin government is probably going to have to handle this oncoming winter. Finland is not alone in this particular situation, of course, but because the Marin government had never done any massive tax increases during their time in office, there is particular concern over the cost of electricity right now, especially from the electricity company Fortum, which is partially owned by the Finnish government. Because right now, there doesn't seem to be a lot they can do to financially prop up the company if they start having more problems. And of course, while Finland is relatively wealthy, the group of people who are currently suffering the most from the increasing price of living are, of course, the people living in the lower income brackets in this country. And people have most likely noticed how gasoline prices have gotten kind of out of control. Now, to her credit, this summer, Sanna Marin did announce that she was going to make some tax breaks in sectors to alleviate those who are going to be the most heavily hit by these problems. There has also been news that businesses and even homes might suffer from electricity shortages, although experts are saying that at this point that threat is still theoretical. It nevertheless is looking increasingly bleak for Marin and her government, and all this is giving a lot of ammunition to her political opponents for this oncoming election. Now, I said I wasn't going to make any real predictions for the oncoming election. I'll try to save up some of those thoughts for a video when the elections actually happen next spring. Now, I don't think there's any real threat to Marin herself for her to lose her position in the parliament, because I think the more broader issue right now is that rather than Marin herself, her party, the SDP, is currently not very popular. This at least seems to be the case if we're looking at the polls, all of which right now are looking like the NCP might be the next head of government. However, polls are very finicky things and they don't always tell the whole truth. It's true the NCP has a lot of momentum right now, so I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that they might win the next election. But right now the bigger question is whether the action that Marin's government is doing right now is actually going to help the Finnish public over the next winter. My big question especially is over those tax breaks, because I was under the impression that you can't just magically shift tax laws in the middle of a tax year. So at any rate, it looks like this autumn might be a bit miserable for her government, and we're really gonna have to wait until spring, by which point it might actually be kind of too late for Marin and her government. And although the SDP and the Center Party seemingly patched things up back in 2021, there's still been a lot of rumbling from that party regarding the Marin government, showing that the Center Party has maybe finally done being so humble and quiet after those embarrassing Sipilä years. But like I said, that remains to be seen. Now, on a personal note, I personally think Sanna Marin has been a perfectly serviceable prime minister. Yes, obviously her government has made a couple of mistakes, and I don't think we can blame Marin for not foreseeing the Ukraine crisis and all the unfortunate things that have come out of that. I do think, however, that her government situation right now is a bit unsustainable and is looking kind of bad. But as a prime minister overall, I don't think she's done anything hugely wrong. Anyway, that was this Leaders of Finland video. I'm TheHande, and see you on the next one.